Well, how dare they? I am outraged, I tell you, absolutely outraged. It is a conspiracy, I tell you, an unholy alliance of the highest order between the gospel writer known as Matthew and those who composed the common lectionary, and quite possibly Tom Zolzer. Matthew started it by putting a passage in the midst of his writings to begin with. The lectionary committee, for some insane reason, decided that that passage ought to appear in the 3-year cycle of the lectionary, and then your own interim minister had the audacity to suggest that Union Church should center on the gospel passage from the lectionary this Sunday. It is a conspiracy of the highest order. It must be a secret society from the time of Christ on. Here, my Advent and Christmas season were humming along just wonderfully as my stomach, and probably everyone else's, was filled with pecan pie and Christmas chocolate. My mind was filled with sweet babies in rustic stables, cleanly swept, of course, no manure, attended by a range of characters from angels to shepherds to kings, or at least well-dressed men called wise, with halos over all of the major players and heavenly light dancing around the whole group. Mary absolutely glowing, Joseph rugged and manly, silent as a stone, the shepherds somehow all spiffed up, lily-white sheep in tow, wise men looking wise and rather exotic, bearing gifts worth more than a Mega Millions jackpot. Somewhere in the midst, a drummer boy, a donkey, a cow, a ram, doves in the rafters high, wise men's camels peeking in the windows, and all of it accompanied by a John Williams soundtrack of favorite carols. And then Matthew has to muck it all up with foreboding visions, our royal family reduced to refugee status, all 3 of them probably undocumented, all of this while a paranoid, power-crazed king orders the slaughter of an entire region's supply of baby boys, and then the ding-dongs who created the common lectionary decided that this little horror story of Matthew's was important enough that it should be read and expounded upon once every 3 years. And then your pastor suggests that this very passage should be the passage that I center my sermon upon today. Okay, in truth, I really do think this is an important passage. In truth, I didn't really think there was a conspiracy. In truth, I planned to preach on this passage even before Tom suggested it to me. When I did agree to preach this Sunday and realized that this passage from the Gospel of Matthew was the one called up for the first Sunday in the season of Christmas, year A of the common lectionary, the first thing, oddly, that came to my mind, rather unexpectedly, was the Appalachian folk carol, "I wonder, as I wander out under the sky, how Jesus the Savior did come for to die." And from there grew a vision that I would like to share with all of you this morning and ask you to join into. In the vision, I was indeed wandering under the December night sky. But as I saw it, it was not the sky of Mount Clair, New Jersey, or anywhere else in this area. For the skies here are not my vision of God's sky, as these skies are shaped and colored far too much by humankind. Blank, but nowhere nearly truly dark, with only the brightest stars gleaming weakly through at best. and at worst a muddy orange glowing gloom that makes shadows edged by street lights seem even inkier. No, this sky is the sky of my youth in the cornfields of southern Indiana, where the night is a velvet black curtain bejeweled by millions and billions of points of light in numbers so great that they themselves can produce a silver wash upon the landscape that, when I let my eyes adjust, allows me to navigate. And human-made lights are reduced to pinpoints on the horizon. There is a hush upon the place. No hiss of cars on the nearby interstate, no rumble of jets overhead, no scream of sirens in the distance, no earbuds thumping in my ears with music or chatty phone calls. And yet, in this hush, there is a sound, a distinctively human sound, the sound of wailing. And from the silvery meld of shadow and light there emerges a woman, herself draped in darkness so as to be difficult to define in any certain terms. And knowing but also aware that the question must be asked, I spoke as one cued in a Dickens novel, "Who are you, madam?" To which she gave the reply that I expected, "I am Rachel, weeping for my children because they are no more." "Your children, as noted by Jeremiah, carried off from Ramah to Babylon?" said I. "Yes," she said, "and more." "Your children slaughtered by Herod in the region of Bethlehem?" said I, and she said, "Yes, and more." And at this point I paused, for I had no other biblical reference. She continued, "I cry for all my children, lost throughout the ages to starvation and disease and plague, to gross acts of war and single acts of violence, lost to the neglect of many and to the neglect of few, lost to paranoia and conquest and greed, lost in times of horror widely publicized, and at other times in horrors that are grieved by no one beyond their own mothers, if that mother herself is not lost by that time." Moved by such a tremendous grief, I wept with this woman. I wept to know her loss and to know the grief of countless others throughout the ages to that very day. And with my weeping and in my righteousness, my self-righteousness, I also railed against the armies of Babylon and against the paranoia of Herod the Great, and against all those who without second thought were responsible for the loss of her children and my children and God's children. In my righteousness, I targeted my anger upon kings and armies and terrorists, upon the powerful and the callous, the uncaring, the self-absorbed, and anyone else I could think of. But then I saw her looking at me with a gaze that could pierce a great beast to the heart. She looked at me. With tremendous sadness, she cast her gaze upon me, and I stopped my railing, my anger quelled under that withering gaze, and she said to me, "Sir, your anger is misguided in great part." "Misguided," said I. "In what way? Are these not worthy of anger who I raise before you?" "Possibly," she replied. "But they are only a visible part of a greater evil." "And what is that greater evil, that I may battle it?" I said. "The greater evil," she said, "encompasses all who are powerful and many who are weak, all who have much and most who have little. For it bestows blindness upon humankind and sometimes curses most deeply those who proclaim to have sight. My children are lost, said she, because they have no value, or at least much less value than the value of other things and other concepts. My daughters and my sons were taken from Ramah to Babylon because the Babylonians valued security gained from the scattering of their enemies more highly than they valued the people themselves. My innocent sons of Bethlehem were lost because Herod valued his throne greater than the lives of children he did not know. My children in every race and creed are enslaved through the ages because they are able to produce things that are valued more than their own freedom and their own rights and even their very lives. She continued to me, the clothing you wear and the ability to obtain that clothing must be valued more highly than is the justice for the peasants of Vietnam or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. The food upon your table is eaten without thought to the fact that its popularity in your land has the power to cause starvation in the land of another. Even your refuse is shipped halfway around the world to be processed into useful materials because so few in your land would labor at such menial tasks. And governments in those nations called developed do not wish the poisonous byproducts within their borders. She said to me, humankind has created intricate webs to hide the value of life, to deny the value of life, to bargain and barter justice until few suspect that they may be complicit. And suddenly my self-righteousness fled before the overwhelming sense of shame and despair. And I cried to this woman, then how can anyone be saved? How can I be saved? I sense that I am more desperately lost than any that you weep. To which she replied in a voice of hope, but sir, you are saved. You are saved by the very one you proclaim and whose is your source of wonder. And again that folk song rang in my ears, and the words came. I wonder as I wander out under the sky, how Jesus the Savior did come for to die for poor, ordinary people like you and like I. The woman continued, the one who is and was and will ever be became like you and like me and like anyone and everyone, so that salvation could come as well. Salvation to the innocents and those who are anything but innocent, to those who are righteous and those who are sinners, to those who are complicit within that eternally complex web that sin weaves. She said, to wonder is a great step towards salvation and the recovery of those who are lost. And this is the message you must proclaim. Call the people to wonder, to imagine, to envision, to pray for guidance and grace. Tell the people to act when they can, to ponder always the value of human life, to engage those powers whenever possible, to acknowledge their complicity when appropriate, to minister at every opportunity, and always to wonder. For salvation is to those who wonder. And rejoice, friend, she said to me. Rejoice that God has come to you and to me and to all humankind, incarnate, and that God's incarnate Son continues with us in spirit to bring us light, that we might continue to wonder. And suddenly I realized that the darkness had shifted, and the velvet blackness of the sky was now an endless deep blue, and far upon the horizon there was the first glimmer of pink to announce the dawn. And when once again I focused my gaze upon the vision before me, the woman was no more. And I went from that place, in heart and in mind, knowing that a gift had been given to me, a troubling, thrilling, confusing gift. I went from that place knowing that I will, in the grace of God, forever wonder.